Today's show is sponsored by The Truth About How to Save Money and Time. Amazingly Simple Business Success Tips. It was written by Lisa DeShoram and Brenda Warren. It will be coming soon. And by the Power 13, the Daddy Daughter Dynamic Project. 13 ladies experiencing challenges of daddy daughter relationships. Each share their personal journey of healing. This soon to be released anthology is filled with the true life stories to help you navigate the daddy daughter dynamic. Hi, everyone. I'm Brenda Warren, the solutionist. I help people turn their mess or their mission into a message for the masses. I also coach women in transition that are ready to live their lives unapologetically unstoppable. Today, I want to talk to you about abortion. That issue has been in the news and been a topic of conversation all over our country ever since the Supreme Court document was leaked that there's a possibility that Roe v. Wade will be overturned. In 1973, the Supreme Court decided, and I want to read this to you because I pulled it up. I thought it was important to do that they made the landmark decision and said the court ruled that the Constitution of the United States protects a pregnant woman's liberty to choose to have an abortion without excessive government restriction. And now, all these years later, they are actually having a conversation about overturning that constitutional right. You know, whatever your beliefs are about this topic, I just wanted to have the conversation. So I invited one of my fellow super connectors to come on with me. And we're having a little bit of a technical difficulty. She's not here yet, but I'm going to start the conversation and hopefully she arrives. And if she doesn't, I'll just give you my thoughts. As simple as this. I think each person, each woman that is faced with this choice, it's not an easy choice, should have the right to make the decision with her partner, her husband, or her family and her doctors without, and I'll repeat, without government intervention. You see, I grew up in the church. I'm a Christian, and I grew up believing that life is sacred. And I still believe that. But I also believe that if God gives me free choice for salvation and God gives me free will in general, how dare the government say I don't have free will and free choice when it comes to my body and my reproductive rights? The thing that bothers me the most is thinking that as they make these decisions that are mostly being made by men that will never, and I do repeat, never have to deal with the heart-crushing decision to decide if they would have to choose to have an abortion, that women now are being told what to do with their bodies once again. I think it's amazing that we have this dilemma going on. And I really want to have the conversation because it's been having on. I see my guest has arrived and I'm going to put her into the live stream so that Elise can help me with this conversation. So if you guys stand by, let me add Elise into the stream. Hi, Elise. So glad to have you here. How are you?
Oh, I'm so fantastic. And I was like, okay, Miss Brenda is up. And now we're doing it and talking about the real stuff. So I'm excited.
Yeah. Thank you. Well, let me, before we go any further into, because I started the conversation anticipating your arrival, let's talk about what we're doing today. First of all, it's Face It Friday. So on Face It Fridays, at least on this program, what I do is face something that is bothering me or that I need help with. And I want to thank you, first off, for coming on to have this conversation with me, because although this is not really the topic that you would normally be talking about on Face It, I just felt like it was something I wanted to discuss. And I'm happy that you're here to help me face it. But before we face it, which today's it is abortion, I want you all to meet my friend Elise Alexander. She is a fellow super connector, a mastermind member. She is a speaker. And I wrote all this stuff down because she's so much. A wealth mindset business coach, a speaker, a trader, and a podcaster, her Boss Bitch Energy podcast. I'm like, oh, come on now, Boss Bitches. Let me get it right. Energy podcast is amazing. And what I love about reading Elise's bio was it talks about how she honestly was having issues about money. Her and her family determined people's value based on how much money they had, and how she had no voice for herself concerning her finances. She was working 3 jobs, and she was really just burnt out trying to find out how she was going to find her wealth and her money magic. And then she decided she had a choice, she had a voice, and she was about to use it. So she became a coach. And because she became a coach, she knew she was meant to help other people learn the secrets to sustaining wealth. And so that's her guide. She makes sure that people know that sustainable wealth is possible. And so I'm going to ask that Elise comes back at another time, and we're going to talk all about that because it's fascinating what she does and why she does it. But today, Elise is going to simply be here as a friend to help me face it, abortion. Let's talk about it. So Elise, let's talk about it. And I want to give you the opportunity. What I already did for the audience is I read to them, and I'll pull it back up, what it says about the Roe v. Wade 410 U.S. 113 in 1973 was a landmark decision of the U.S. Supreme Court in which the court ruled that the Constitution of the United States protects a pregnant woman's liberty to choose to have an abortion without excessive government restriction. Now, at least I tried to get several women to come on and have this conversation because it's my contention that regardless of your view, and I don't know yours yet, so we're going to talk about that we should have the conversation and we can all agree to disagree without being disagreeable, whether you're pro-life, no life, pro-choice, no choice, whatever it is. The conversation needs to be had because we have a bunch of men sitting up there in some long robes about to mess with a potential system. We don't know what they're going to do since that thing that was passed out was a draft, but that draft was enough to still to instill fear in people, in women specifically, all across the country. So I wanted to have this conversation because it stressed me out, and I'll tell you why. But I want to give you the opportunity to weigh in on this topic first.
Whew, Brenda, I'm so, so grateful to be here and to step up and give the women permission that they're looking for to be honest about their story, because I know exactly what it's like to step into something that is maybe like a timid conversation, whether you've experienced it or not, and be like, I don't know if I really want to share like my full view, because what if someone's going to judge me or like say something different? Because abortion is a huge topic and it's not something that people normally take lightly. For me, I have a personal experience with it, so it is something that I really take into huge consideration. But overall, the biggest thing that I just want to broach to start with is, let's be honest about this. This does not affect everybody. And when it does not affect everybody, then not everybody's eyes get on it. So it is our duty to continue to put other people's eyes on it so that they can weigh in or weigh out. But it's just like when people were saying, not enough people voted last year. Like it's about putting it in front of someone else's eye, because how I truly feel about it, Brenda, is I am pro-life. But then I got to the point where I understood that when I was then put in that situation, you were forced to make a choice.
Yeah.
And I needed to make the choice for me that was different than what everyone wanted from me. And when I made that choice, I made it alone, and then had to deal with whatever it was, consequences or life experience, alone. And that is not how other women get to choose to be there and how to choose to experience it. Because now I'm obviously no longer pro-life and I am pro-choice, because I do believe that it is our choice and our body. And at the end of the day, you would never know what you would do with that decision until you are sitting in that chair and someone gives you that information.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, I have a personal connection with this story as well, Elise, because for me, mine came when at the age of 31, I was raped by someone I trusted, and it was a violent rape. And it was so horrific for me on 2 counts. First thing was, after I was so violently physically assaulted. I then had to deal with the knowledge that I could have, number one, possibly had a venereal disease. And then I'm listening to the doctors had a conversation and that I could also be pregnant because he did not use protection. And I'm sure in those situations, most people don't. So now I'm sitting here being told, we're going to give you this medication, and we're going to give you that. And there was no morning after pill at that time. It was simply, we're going to have to do hurry up and wait and see if you've caught a venereal disease and see if you're pregnant. And then you will be given that information and you will have to make a decision. At the time when that happened, I would have squarely stood planted solid on the ground. I'm pro life, never going to happen in my lifetime. But I had never been faced with that situation. I was so traumatized that the thought of carrying a child of that person was something I could not even fathom. I could not imagine that after being done what was done to me, that I would then have to carry a child created by that incident. And in my mind, I thought, whatever it takes, I want it gone because I do not want to remember that. I don't want to be abusing that child or hold anybody accountable. There was no situation where I couldn't afford it because I had the money, or so there's all things that have to be taken into account. And I think each woman has to make the decision based on what works for her, her family, her lifestyle, her body, her choice. And I thank God that I didn't have to get that choice because I did not catch a venereal disease. And thank God I did not become pregnant. However, in my mind, there was no doubt that if they had to give me the answer that I was pregnant, that child would not have come into this world today. So I say that I'm pro-life, but I'm pro-choice. And I don't think that, for me, there seems to be no problem in my mind about that, because when that situation came up for me, it was clear to me that I had to make the choice. And here's the thing about it, Elise. I was thankful that the choice was mine. And the state didn't say, you don't have a choice. You're going to do what you're going to do. And I value that choice so highly. That's why I want to lift my voice now and say, I think it's important for women's mental health being and for their right to choose their reproductive path, that they be given that choice, and that choice remains in their hands and not in the hands of the state or the government. What are your thoughts?
Oh, Brenda. Okay. First thing that comes up is like real. How many women even know that they're pregnant when they are pregnant? It's a
Most don't.
very small percentage. I don't know if anyone's ever actually looked that up. But most people, including the last two generations, think about your moms. Most people said, oh, you know what? I thought I had the flu. I thought I had a
Mm-hmm.
cold, but actually I was already pregnant. In my
Mm-hmm.
experience, I was already 16 weeks by the time I found out,
Wow.
because I didn't even put together the fact that if you missed a couple periods, that it wasn't stress, because I live in the
Mm-hmm.
21st century and I gained stress and I didn't know how to
Mm-hmm.
put it all together. And then acknowledging, okay, once you're already this further along, then there are even less
Mm-hmm.
experiences to be able to get you to where you want to go. I had to go all the way across the state to
Mm-hmm.
even figure out a doctor that would be willing to take care of me in the way that I deserved to take care of. And that's the
Mm-hmm.
biggest thing for me, is that why does anyone else get to decide whether or not I'm going to do something in a back alley or whether or not I'm going to do something in a doctor's office? Because realistically, childbirth is a life threatening experience, and
Mm-hmm.
you get to be safe while having whatever that experience may be for you. And I'll tell you that, I've never shared this story publicly, but I'm feeling this urge to share it. When I woke up and I saw these women sitting next to me, everyone had the same look on their face, and the shame and the
Mm-hmm.
guilt
Mm-hmm.
that they then had to pull themselves out of. And I'm not even talking people of your experience, Brenda. Yes, like we
Mm-hmm.
all have those moments, but women that already had kids, that already had 3 kids,
Right. Right.
women that already had to figure out different scenarios and different situations of
Mm-hmm.
what worked for them. And that was what I got to sit next to when I woke up, was still these women having this many children and having this much shame.
Yes. Yes.
And knowing all of that. So it really got me into a place of like, okay, how do I support and how do I figure it out? So when this year and this happened and everything came down, like, okay, how are we going to figure this out? And how is Roe versus Wade going to be supported? Because I don't even believe that most women know that Roe versus Wade is being challenged. I think that there are like 60% of women that have no idea.
I think a lot of women don't also. I think they don't believe it's going to be overturned. But it's, as someone, as a person of color that watched the voting rights be gutted, I have no doubt that they're not going to change their mind and that they're going to gut, if they don't totally overturn it, that they're going to gut Roe v. Wade. But here's the concern, and as a wealth mindset business coach, I want you to speak to this part in your expertise, because here's what I thought about. This country that does not want to provide childcare for the women that have kids right now, this country that is not already providing for the kids that are already here, is now telling us they want us to bring more kids in here. And financially, I want to think about the financial impact that is occurring, and look at all the women already having to spend money that they wouldn't have to, because they have to leave their states that have already passed very restrictive abortion laws, because women are not going to stop getting abortions. They're just going to become unsafe again. Back when I was a little girl, I still remember the family member that had to get a back alley abortion. I didn't know that's what it was at the time, but I've heard the whispers. Okay. And then I remember a family member that I went with them to an abortion, and my mother was livid. So I've seen a few things in my lifetime about what happens when a woman has a safe place to get an abortion and when they don't. And I want to, have you thought about the economic impact as a wealth coach of all these extra babies that they're going? And then when we get done with that, I want to talk about some of the exceptions that I'm irritated that they're not even going to allow as well. Go ahead, Elise.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So from a terms of a wealth expert looking into this, first I'll go from it from like a microeconomics perspective, because just like Brenda said, you're adding more people into the already like crazy market that is the world market today, because technically we're on a decline. We are going what looks like into a recession. So with that being said, and with supply and demand being where it is, and then supplying more into this, where when we look at a woman's finances and we see that she's already paying more for her reproductive health, for the fact that she has to pay for her own birth control, for the fact that she has to go pay for her own checkups, for the fact that if she decides to get tested for STDs every year, that she has to pay for it. All of these things that men get automatically in their health insurance. So let's just take a look at that financially perspectively. That's like a 20, maybe $15,000, $20,000 difference in terms of what women pay every year comparatively to what men pay in how much they're giving out in difference. First off. Second off, when you look at the fact, China, perfect example, where everyone said, no, you can only have one baby. This is it. We're doing just this. And what did everybody do, you guys? Stop having babies?
Okay,
no. They didn't stop having babies. They kept having babies. And then they overpopulated. And then they got to a place where they couldn't figure out more places for people to live. And now they are growing and thriving, but it took them recognizing that what they were doing wasn't working. And because there is not enough of us standing up and saying, hey, I have been someone who has benefited from this experience, and I have been someone who has not had to pay the absurd fees or go to the crazy places or do this absurd thing, and I'm going to stand for it. I think from a money place, personally, I spent over like $3,000 getting from within, like, no insurance, and most women obviously don't have insurance, and then mentally needing to pick yourself back up from it. So if we put that all together, and then $1 million to raise a child in this country in 2022, yes, I just said that out loud. It takes $1 million to raise a child in this country in 2022. What choice would you make? what experience would you want to have? Because ultimately, you're the one that's going to be living your life. And as women, we take on all the others' responsibilities and all of these things, and financial responsibility and emotional responsibility, that by the end of the day, the economy has broken, we're broken inside, and what do we do then? Like, where do we fight? What stands up for us next? So ultimately, I do believe that giving someone the right to choose, and giving someone even just the space that they can be held to create, which is what the women's, I think it was called the Women's National Right to Freedom Act, that they induced, that is a small piece, but you would need to take away the fact that every time they induce an act, I don't know if you know this, Brenda, but every time they induce an act, they take away like 20 or 30 clinics per area of
No, I didn't
people
know
who are
that.
able to practice, because of the picketing, because of the riots, because of, like, would you want to go into a clinic that had 100 people outside throwing things at you?
No, and what I also want to mention here, because I know I only have you for a short time because you have to get to your show, but I want to mention here too that, remember, people are not going to have stop having sex, and abortions are going to go on. Women of wealth are not going to have a problem with this because they can get on any plane, go anywhere, and still do it safely. It's the women, the majority of women that are not economically prepared for this, that are going to feel the brunt of this the most. So you're going to see this disparity going up really quickly. And we're already seeing it in Texas, where they're heading over to Hawaii to get abortions. And a lot of people still can't afford it, even wealthy. But wealthy women can fly from Texas to Hawaii. But the women that were already with 3 kids and or in a bad relationship or whatever, it's not economically feasible for them to travel. And I want to switch from there because I know this is not a conversation we can just cover in 30 minutes, but I wanted to get the conversation started. And I hope you'll come back when I'm able to put together a panel and really flesh this discussion out. Because I want to talk about the exceptions that they're also say they're removing and that I've seen in some of the state bills. If there is incest, if there is rape, an ectopical pregnancy, if a woman has a miscarriage, they're now talking in some states putting criminal charges on that woman. Having a miscarriage is one of the most devastating things you can ever have. And to think that a woman would now have to fear facing criminal charges because her body didn't accept the fetus. And then on top of that, if you have been raped like I was, or if you are a victim of incest, then you're going to have that child. And right now, I've never shared this publicly, but I want to add this because I think it's important to our conversation. I have requested my medical records from when I was a child because of a comment, thing called the daddy-daughter dynamics. And some family members mentioned some things that got me thinking. Why would a 9-year-old need a D&C? I did not know that's something they do to remove fetal tissue. So I know I was molested at that time. I did have a cycle at that time. And I want to see the medical records to find exactly what happened to my body. Because my thought then, I felt like I was re-traumatized when I discovered this information. Because the thought that if this law was to be overturned or was in place at that time, at 9 years old, you mean I would have been forced to have a child? I can't even imagine that. So I want to know for myself, was that even something that was a possibility? Because it began to make me think about people now. If you had a child and that child was that age and became pregnant through incest, rape, or whatever, how do you even go there and say that the parents have no right to the child if they are able to have that conversation? And our kids now are pretty savvy. I'm telling you what, it scares me that they're saying the doctors no longer have to right, because once you become pregnant, that's a medical issue. Women are dying in normal conditions through pregnancy, and now you're telling me I don't have the right to choose what happens to my body. And you're not. I say the first woman that gets pregnant in one of them states where they banned it, they should sue the state for child support. Because you're forcing me to have this baby, then you pay for it. And that the people that say, well, you can have the baby and give it up for abortion. give it up for adoption, excuse me. I get that, but why are you going to tell me that I have to carry a baby to term? Because here's my thought was, say that was, okay, I carry the baby to term, I got to get up as adoption. I'm going to spend the rest of my life worrying, is that child being abused? I've already been traumatized by the rape. Now I'm traumatized because I'm carrying a child I don't want. And then I'm going to be further traumatized for knowing I put that child in this world and not knowing if that child is being cared for or not. I just, where does it stop? And when does our government get to a place where it's not trying to impose? What happened to the separation of church and state? Because what I read was about religious views. It wasn't about the rule of law. I'm not a lawyer, but the things that I say says that doesn't make sense to me. And also, when they say about liberty, that same terminology was used for gay marriage, for interracial marriage, for segregation. What else is going to be rolled back when they take away this constitutional right? And as people are thinking, oh, it's just this, it's a slippery slope that is being ridden across as our rights are being rolled back. As we complain about the Taliban putting women back under complete cover, and here in America, we think it's going to start with abortion rights being revoked. What else are they going to take from us? And when will we stand up and lift our voice and say, enough is enough?
Oh, enough is enough, Brenda, because at the end of the day, we are the ones who experience this. We are the ones sitting here. Okay, I'm gonna take a minute and you're gonna laugh, but then you're gonna be like, excuse me? Because I was walking around talking to someone the other day and I was like, this is why I believe that Ruth Bader Ginsburg is so important. And they looked at me and they said, who's Ruth Bader Ginsburg? And what I am learning in my experience of this human experience and also being a coach and all of it is that money. It's all about money, Brenda.
Absolutely.
It's not about religion. It's not about people's views. It's not about how they feel about something. It's about the money of what happens for the doctors, away from the doctors, for the clinics, away from the clinics, for the people who are doing the policy, away from the people who are doing the policy. But at the end of the day, it's not about what we actually think it's about. So we get to step back and say, okay, who else can we put in to make sure that we protect our liberties? Because we're already going the extra mile and doing the extra thing to make sure that we get to protect ourselves enough now, let alone if you were to put something else into play and say, you know what, no, you don't get to do this. Because had anyone ever said to a man, you know what, I think that you're only allowed to have sex this many times a year, and you had to decide how many children that you wanted, and if it didn't go that way, that you didn't get that decision.
Absolutely.
A man would be like, oh, no, excuse me, I get to make my own decisions, my own rights. But a woman, what? We're just like chopped liver. It doesn't matter. We have been taught by the media and by the government that our voices don't matter. And it is because not many of us are saying, hey, you know what? We really care about this. Hey, you know what? This is really freaking important. So I think ultimately it is just necessary. It's necessary to step into an education role and step into a fighting role for what we care most about. Because even if we haven't experienced this in a great essence, I will be damned if my daughter comes to me and says the same thing that I did to my mom and she tells me I'm a liar. I will be damned. My next generation will not experience this.
I want to continue this conversation, but I want to be mindful. You got to get on to your show. So we're going to continue this conversation. I'm going to have Elise come back because we're not done. But I want you guys to think about this as we go to the next show. Remember, every time you have sex, ladies and gentlemen, for men, it's just a contribution. For women, it's a commitment because whatever they deposit, you get to carry. And now you may have to carry and keep it for the rest of your life and not have a choice in the matter. All right, Elise, thank you for joining me today on face it. Abortion, let's talk about it. I'm going to bring you back and we're going to finish the conversation because I think we need to look at the other side. You said it's about money, but I also think it's about race. I'm going to drop that bomb and let it go right there. And remember, you guys, the choices you make today will be the reality you live tomorrow. Choose wisely. Thank you, Elise, for helping me face it.
I had so much fun.